I still remember the sound. Not the words. Not the shouting. Not even the threat. The sound. My skull smacking against the hallway table so hard the world tilted sideways. Get up. My dad snapped, standing over me like I was something he'd stepped on. You don't get to play victim in my house. My house. That's the part that still makes my hands shake. Because the condo wasn't his. It wasn't my mom's. And damn sure wasn't my sister's. It was mine. You're just house-sitting, Claire. My mom said coldly, yanking my clothes off hangers and shoving them into trash bags. This place fits your sister's lifestyle better. I pressed my fingers to my forehead and pulled them back slick with blood. Behind her, my pregnant sister Madison stood in the living room, phone in one hand, measuring tape in the other. Already mapping out where the crib would go. Like I was already gone. Sign the papers. My dad growled, shoving a clipboard toward me. Or I make sure you never work in this city again. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I didn't beg. I stood up, wiped the blood off my face with the sleeve of my hoodie, and walked out without saying a word. Because I knew something they didn't, and that silence. That was the moment everything changed. 3 blocks away, I sat on the edge of a cheap hotel bed, holding a bag of melting vending machine ice to my head. The pain pulsed like a metronome, steady, unforgiving. It matched my place in the family hierarchy perfectly. Below the golden child. Above the furniture. I didn't cry, didn't call a friend. Didn't post a dramatic story online. Instead, I opened my laptop. Because when something goes missing, that's what I do. My name is Claire Nolan, and for 7 years I've worked supply chain logistics for one of the biggest shipping firms on the East Coast. My entire job is finding things that disappear. Containers, assets, money, and more importantly, figuring out who took them. Funny thing, I could track $1 million losses for corporations, but I'd never audited the theft happening in my own family. Until tonight. I opened a spreadsheet. 5 years back, row after row, cold, no emotions, just facts. And right there, bolded, circled, impossible to ignore, nor 60,000, that number used to haunt my sleep. When I was 24, I worked double shifts in a warehouse with no AC, scanning inventory until my fingers cracked, surviving on instant ramen so I could save every cent. That money was my future. My down payment, my escape. My mom convinced me to put it in a joint account. For safety. Better for your credit, she said. I believed her. The day I went to the bank to get the cashier's check, the teller wouldn't meet my eyes. Miss, the balance is $40. I laughed at first. Thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. My parents had drained every dollar in less than a week. When I confronted them, my mom didn't even apologize. Madison needed to find herself, she said. You know how sensitive she is. Europe was good for her mental health. So while I slept on a friend's futon, Madison posted wine selfies from the Amalfi Coast. Paid for with my blood and overtime, and somehow I was the selfish one for bringing it up. Family helps family, they told me. And like an idiot, I swallowed it. Worked harder, started over. Alone. That's why this condo mattered. This place in Coral Gables wasn't just real estate. It was the first thing in my life that was completely mine. My name on the deed, my money, my mortgage, no joint accounts, no access, no strings. It was my sanctuary, the one place where I wasn't a resource to be drained, and they knew it. That's why they invaded it. They didn't want to help Madison. They wanted to break the one thing I'd kept for myself. They saw clean floors and quiet space and thought, wasted potential. They saw me and thought, temporary. The ice melted in my hand, dripping onto the bedspread. My head still hurt. But the fog was gone. They thought changing the locks meant they'd won. They thought they'd locked me out of my own life. What they forgot was what I do for a living. I don't just find missing things. I punish the people who take them. I picked up my phone, not the police. Not yet. I scrolled to a contact labeled, nuclear option, and pressed call. It was time to stop being the daughter. It was time to become the auditor. I went back the next morning. Not strong. Not loud. Not angry. I went back broken, or at least that's what they needed to see. A clean bandage crossed my forehead. I wore old jeans, a faded hoodie, shoulders slumped, eyes low. The kind of look that screams I didn't sleep, I didn't eat, I lost. I texted my dad first. Claire, I'm coming to get my things, I'll cooperate. He replied 3 minutes later. Dad, good. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The locks clicked open when I arrived. The smell hit me first. Bacon, coffee, comfort. My pans, my life. Madison was stretched across the island like she owned the place, scrolling her phone with one hand, sipping fresh, squeezed orange juice with the other. My mom wiped down counters like she was already settled in. My dad sat at my dining table reading the paper, feet kicked up. They looked relaxed, like parasites finally comfortable in a warm host. I'm glad you came to your senses, my dad said without looking up. We didn't want to involve lawyers, Claire, but you pushed us. I swallowed and nodded. I know, I said quietly. I can't fight you? That sentence tasted like acid. I can't afford legal fees. I can't risk my job. You win, I'll move out. Madison smirked and glanced at my mom. Told you, she said. She always folds. And there it was. The arrogance, the certainty. They didn't see a person standing in front of them. They saw a habit. But then I tilted my head, like something just occurred to me. There's just one problem, I said softly. My mom froze. What problem? The condo board. The room shifted. They already know I'm moving out. I lied smoothly. Security logs. This building has a strict owner-occupied rule. They're cracking down on unauthorized residents. Madison's smile slipped. So, she snapped. I'm family. They don't care, I said. They fined a guy 10 grand last week for having an unregistered roommate. That got her attention. Eviction proceedings start fast here, I continued. Especially in this building. Silence. Then, panic. So fix it, Madison snapped. You're good at paperwork. Fix it. I nodded slowly, like I'd already thought this through. I might be able to, I said, pulling a thick document from my bag. There's a loophole, a residency exemption. My mom leaned in. If the occupant can prove they have substantial personal assets located in the unit, I explained, they can be classified as a stakeholder instead of a tenant. I placed the document on the island. It looked official. Terrifying. Final. You list high-value items, I said. Furniture, electronics, art. You swear they belong to you, Madison. That you brought them in. My dad squinted at the paper. And that works. I spoke to the board president this morning. I lied again. It works. This was the edge of the cliff. Any honest person would stop, any smart person would ask questions. But entitlement makes people stupid. Madison didn't hesitate. She grabbed the pen. The TV, she said, writing fast. That Sony OLED? Yep. I nodded. Write it down. The leather sectional. The Vitamix. The espresso machine. She smiled as she claimed my life, item by item. Then she went further. The channel bag. She muttered. The Dyson Airwrap. The MacBook Pro. I kept my face neutral. Because those weren't mine. Those were purchased 3 months ago, on a credit card opened in my name. She was documenting her own crime. Line by line. Over $28,000 worth of stolen merchandise. My dad stood taller as she wrote. Sign as witness, Dad. Madison said, sliding the clipboard toward him. It proves you vouch for the assets. He didn't even read it. Signed with a flourish. Then looked at me with that familiar smug smile. See, he said. Not hard to be helpful, Claire. I took the clipboard back and nodded. No, I said quietly. Not hard at all. I turned and walked out. They went back to breakfast. They thought they'd secured the condo. What they'd actually done was sign their own paperwork into evidence. Back in the hotel room, I didn't rest. I executed phase 2. See, they thought the fight was about bedrooms and square footage. They had no idea I'd already sold the battlefield. While they argued about paint colors, I was on the phone with Evan Brooks, an acquisitions manager for a firm that buys distressed property for cash. No showings, no delays, 7-day close. The price, $30,000 under market. Old me would have panicked. New me called it an extraction fee. I signed the DocuSign. As of Saturday morning, the condo wouldn't belong to me. It would belong to a corporation with a zero-tolerance policy for squatters. Then my phone buzzed. Transaction approved 4th 250 vendor Royal Tot Luxury Furnishings. I smiled. Madison had ordered a crib, not just any crib, hand-carved mahogany, velvet lining, Saturday morning delivery. Signature required. That's when I made my final call. Detective Harris, I said calmly. She took the bait. Detective Harris didn't say much when I told him about the delivery. That's how I knew I had him. Silence on the line. Then a slow breath. "You're sure she'll be there?" he asked. "I'm looking at the tracking number right now," I said. Signature required. "She'll sign my name like she always does." Another pause. "All right," he said finally. "We'll handle it." The call ended, and for the first time since my head hit that table, my body relaxed. Because now it wasn't just my word. It was a timeline. Saturday morning came faster than I expected. I barely slept Friday night. Not because I was nervous, but because my brain wouldn't shut off. Every lie they'd ever told me. Every dollar they'd taken. Every time I'd swallowed my anger to keep the peace. Peace is expensive, and I'd paid for it my whole life. At 8:30 a.m., I sat in a rented gray sedan down the street from my building, engine idling. I didn't want my car anywhere near this. Across from me sat Evan Brooks, the acquisitions manager, pressed suit, calm eyes, no emotions, a man who bought problems for a living. He checked his watch. "Closing's finalized," he said. "Case transfer at 9 sharp. I nodded. The condo wasn't mine anymore. That still hit hard. But it didn't hurt like it used to, because ownership isn't just paperwork, it's control. And I still had that. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. I opened the feed. Balloons. Streamers. My mom fluttered around directing relatives like a wedding planner. Madison stood in the center of the room, glowing with pride, hand on her stomach, soaking up attention. They were throwing a housewarming party. In a condo that didn't belong to them. In a life built on lies. They looked untouchable. That's the thing about entitled people. They celebrate early. At 9:47 a.m., another buzz. Delivery truck 3 minutes away. Evan glanced at me. "Police ready. Staged around the corner," I said. "Plain clothes. They'll move when she signs." He nodded once. "Professional." A white, unmarked box truck turned onto the street. Not Amazon. Not UPS high-value freight. The driver wore a generic cap pulled low. "Officer Alvarez." Harris didn't mess around. We got out of the car and walked toward the building. My heart wasn't racing. No shaky hands. Just clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was reconciliation with the truth. In the lobby, the driver buzzed Unit 204. "Delivery for Madison Carter." Her voice crackled through the intercom. Excited, breathless. "Send it up." Evan glanced at me. "That's consent." The elevator ride was silent. When the doors opened, the noise hit us like a wave. Music. Laughter. Champagne popping. The door to my old unit was propped open with my doorstop. I stepped inside first. The living room was packed. Aunt Lori admiring the view. Cousin Ben eating catered shrimp off my marble island. Neighbors I'd never invited. Laughing, drinking, comfortable. Madison clapped her hands when she saw the box. "It's here!" The crib. Her fiancé, Ryan, stood off to the side, arms crossed. He didn't look excited. He looked tired. Like someone starting to realize the math wasn't adding up. "Sign here, ma'am," Officer Alvarez said, holding out the digital pad. Madison didn't even look. She grabbed the stylus and signed with a flourish. That was it. Ink met glass. Evidence locked. "Police," Alvarez said sharply. "Hands behind your back." The room froze. Music cut. Conversation died mid-sentence. Detective Harris and 2 uniformed officers stepped in from the hallway. Madison laughed nervously. "What is this? Is this a joke? Madison Carter?" Harris said loudly, "You are under arrest for identity theft, credit card fraud, and grand larceny." The stylus slipped from her fingers. "What? No? This is my apartment!" she screamed. "Claire, tell them!" She saw me then, standing near the door calm. Watching. "Actually," I said evenly, "this apartment was sold 3 days ago." Evan stepped forward. "You're all trespassing on corporate property." My dad pushed through the crowd, face red with rage. "She owns everything here!" We signed paperwork. Harris reached into his jacket and pulled out the affidavit. "We have that paperwork," he said. "A sworn statement listing stolen assets as personal property. And you signed as witness." The blood drained from my dad's face. You framed her, Harris continued. And we have video and medical documentation of your assault on Claire Nolan. The handcuffs clicked again. This time on him. My mom stood frozen on the curb outside, sobbing into a silk scarf. Madison screamed in the back of the squad car, not for a lawyer, for her daddy, but he couldn't save her anymore. I walked over to Ryan. He stood there holding an engagement ring Madison had thrown at him during the arrest. I didn't know, he whispered. I know, I said. I handed him a sealed envelope. Read this before you bail her out. Inside were bank statements and a DNA test. He opened it. I watched the moment his world cracked. He didn't say a word. He got in his car and drove away. The party was over. The illusion shattered, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't cleaning up their mess. The street was quiet again. Too quiet. Like the world had exhaled and decided it was done watching. Police cars pulled away one by one. Neighbors drifted back inside, whispering, pretending they hadn't just witnessed a family implode on the sidewalk. Only one person stayed. My mother. She stood near the curb, shoulders shaking, mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching her designer handbag like it was a life raft. For a second, just a second, I almost felt that familiar pull, the reflex, the one that said, go fix it, make it better, apologize. That reflex had ruled my entire childhood. But not today. She looked up when she saw me. Claire, she sobbed, stepping toward me. How could you do this to us? There it was. Not what did we do wrong? Not are you okay? Not even I'm sorry. Just blame. Like clockwork. You destroyed this family, she said, voice cracking. You sent your sister to jail. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't clench my fists. I just looked at her hand, still gripping that expensive bag. Let go, I said quietly. What? My arm, I said. Let go? She realized she was holding me. She released me slowly, like she'd just noticed the contact herself. I finally met her eyes. No, I said. I didn't destroy anything. Her mouth opened, ready to argue. You did, I continued. You and Dad did. A long time ago. She shook her head violently. We were trying to help Madison. You know how fragile she is. That word, fragile, they'd used it my whole life. Madison was fragile. I was durable. Madison needed protection. I needed responsibility. Do you know how many times I've heard that? I asked. That she needed more because she was fragile. Silence. You know what that taught me, I said. That I didn't get to be fragile. Ever. Her breathing slowed. I took a step closer. Not aggressive, just grounded. You let them take my savings, I said. You watched me work myself sick and said nothing. You let Dad hit me. She flinched at that. He didn't mean. Stop, I said. One word, sharp, final. This is the first time in my life, I continued, that I didn't clean up your mess. Tears streamed down her face. We're your family, she whispered. Family forgives. I laughed. Not loud, just a breath of disbelief. No, I said. Family protects. Family doesn't steal from you and call it love. She sank down onto the curb. I stood there, looking at the woman who raised me, and realizing something terrifying and freeing all at once. She was never going to understand. Not because she couldn't, because she didn't want to. Understanding would mean accountability. And accountability was something my family had never survived. I turned away. Claire, she called after me. Where are you going? I paused. Somewhere quiet, I said. Somewhere I don't have to earn my right to exist. I walked toward the waiting rideshare. The driver rolled down the window. Airport. Yes, I said. One way. As the car pulled off, I looked back one last time. She was still sitting on the curb. Small. Alone. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for fixing it. At the airport, the adrenaline finally wore off. That's when the shaking started. Not fear. Release? I sat at the gate, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee I wasn't drinking, staring at the departure board. I'd booked the ticket without thinking. Chicago. No family. No history. No expectations. Just space. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Madison, you ruined my life. I stared at the message, then blocked the number. Another buzz. Dad, you'll regret this. Blocked. Another. Mom, please call me. Blocked. 3 taps. 3 doors closed. My hands stopped shaking. On the plane, as the city shrank below me, something settled in my chest. Not joy, not victory. Something quieter, relief. For the first time in 29 years, there was no one pulling at me, no one draining me, no one telling me who I was allowed to be. Just silence. And it wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. Chicago didn't greet me with fireworks, no dramatic soundtrack, no magical sense of arrival. Just cold air, gray skies, and a baggage carousel that wouldn't stop squeaking. I stepped off the plane with one suitcase, a laptop bag, and a body that didn't know how to relax yet. Because when you've spent your whole life in survival mode, peace feels suspicious. The apartment I rented was small, studio 3rd floor, no view. But it was mine, no family keys, no just stopping by, no emotional landmines waiting in the corners. The first night, I slept on the floor. Not because I had to. Because it felt right to start with nothing. I stared at the ceiling and waited for the guilt to hit. It didn't. What came instead was exhaustion so deep it felt like my bones were finally allowed to rest. The next morning, I woke up panicked, heart racing, phone in my hand before I was even conscious. That old reflex. Check for emergencies, see who needs something, brace for damage control. There were no missed calls. No texts. No fires to put out. I sat there on the edge of the mattress and whispered, "Oh." This was what quiet really sounded like. I started my new job 2 weeks later. Same field. Different company. No one knew my story. No one expected me to overperform to earn love. My manager asked me something on my first day that nearly made me cry. "Do you prefer feedback in writing or verbally?" No one had ever asked what I preferred before. I picked writing. Control felt good. But healing isn't linear. Some nights I woke up convinced I'd forgotten something important. Some days I flinched when someone raised their voice. Even joking. And every once in a while, guilt crept in like an uninvited guest. "You broke your mother's heart, you abandoned your family. You went too far." That voice sounded a lot like my dad, so I started answering it. Out loud. I didn't abandon them, I'd say. I left a burning building. The first piece of furniture I bought was a desk, solid wood, heavy, something that didn't wobble. As I assembled it, I realized something strange. No one was rushing me. No one was criticizing how I did it. No one was taking over. I could take as long as I wanted. I sat at that desk that night and opened a new spreadsheet. Not to track loss, to track recovery. Savings rebuilt, credit repaired, boundaries enforced. It was the first audit I'd ever done for myself. One evening, while unpacking, I found the bandage wrapper from my forehead injury, still stuffed in a jacket pocket. I stared at it for a long time, then threw it away. Not ceremoniously, just done. Healing doesn't always need closure. Sometimes it just needs distance. A month later, I ran into a woman at a coffee shop who reminded me of myself. Same tired eyes. Same apologetic smile. She spilled her drink and immediately started saying sorry, to me. "It's okay," I said gently. "You didn't do anything wrong." She looked shocked. Like no one had ever told her that before. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about escape. It was about becoming someone who didn't repeat the cycle. The calls stopped eventually. Blocked numbers faded into silence. Court dates came and went without my presence. I let lawyers handle what wasn't mine to carry anymore. Because that's the thing about boundaries. They don't require explanation. One night, sitting by my window, watching snow fall for the first time that year, I realized something that nearly knocked the breath out of me. I felt safe. Not happy. Not thrilled. Safe. And for someone like me, that was everything. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon. No subject line. Just my mother's name. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Blocked numbers are easy. Emails feel intentional. I told myself I'd delete it. I didn't. "Claire, I know you don't want to hear from me. I just need you to know I'm sick. I'm starting treatment next month. I don't expect forgiveness. I just don't want to disappear from your life completely." There it was. The hook, fear wrapped in softness. I felt my chest tighten. Not with love, but with recognition. This was the move. The one that made me doubt myself. I closed the laptop and went for a walk. Chicago wind slapped my face awake. I replayed the message in my head. Not what it said, but what it didn't. No apology, No ownership, no accountability, just urgency, just need. I talked about it in therapy.
Yes.
Therapy. Another thing my old life told me was dramatic. My therapist listened quietly, then asked one question. If nothing changed, what would letting her back in cost you? I didn't answer right away. Because I already knew. I replied 3 days later. Not emotional. Not cold. Clear. I'm sorry you're dealing with health issues. I hope treatment goes well. I'm not ready for contact. Please respect that. I hit send. My hands shook. Then stopped. 2 days later, another email. Longer. More emotional. I don't understand why you're punishing me. I'm still your mother. Madison is struggling. Your father's legal situation is worse than we expected. We need you. There it was. Not I miss you. Not I hurt you. We need you. I didn't respond. Silence is a boundary too. A week later, she showed up. At my building. I was coming home from work when I saw her standing near the entrance, coat too thin for the weather, eyes scanning every face. For a split second, the old instinct screamed, fix this. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my therapist earlier that day. You're allowed to choose peace. Even if others call it cruelty. I walked past her. She saw me. Claire. She called. I stopped. Turned not out of guilt. Out of choice. You look good, she said quickly. I am, I said. She stepped closer. Can we talk? Not here? Then where? Nowhere? I said calmly. Her face collapsed. I'm your mother. And I'm your daughter, I said, not your caretaker. Her eyes filled with tears. I made mistakes, she whispered. So did I said. Staying too long was one of them. She reached for me. I stepped back. That movement. That was the victory. She left without yelling. Without a scene. Just defeated. I stood there shaking, not from fear, from pride. Because boundaries don't always feel strong. Sometimes they feel like grief. That night, I cried. Not because I wanted her back, because I finally accepted she was never coming to meet me where I stood. And that was okay. Closure didn't arrive with fireworks. It came in an envelope. Plain. White, no return address. I almost threw it out with the junk mail. Something told me not to. Inside were court documents. Finalized. Stamped. My father had taken a plea deal. Probation. Mandatory anger management. A permanent restraining order. Madison's case was still pending, but the tone was clear. Consequences had finally caught up. I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at my name printed there. Not as a daughter. As a victim. That word used to scare me. Now it felt accurate and strangely validating. A week later, I ran into Ryan again. Completely by accident. Same coffee shop. Different city. Life's funny like that. He looked older. Quieter. We sat down. Not as enemies, not as family. Just two people who survived the same storm. She told me you were cold. He said after a moment, hurtless. I smiled softly. They always do. She took money from me too, he admitted. More than I knew. I nodded. They count on silence. He looked at me carefully. How did you walk away? I didn't answer right away. I realized love that requires self-destruction isn't love. I said finally. He nodded like that was something he'd been trying to name for a long time. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and opened the first spreadsheet I'd made in Chicago. The recovery one. The numbers had grown. Savings, stability, peace. But the biggest shift wasn't financial. It was internal. I didn't flinch when my phone buzzed anymore. I didn't apologize for existing. I didn't explain my boundaries. I just lived. I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who believed endurance was the same as strength. The one who thought loyalty meant silence. She wasn't weak. She was trained. And retraining yourself out of survival mode. That's the hardest work there is. One afternoon, my therapist asked me something that stuck. If your story weren't yours, what would you tell the woman living it? The answer came instantly. Leave sooner. I laughed. Then cried. Then laughed again. Because growth doesn't erase grief. It just teaches you how to carry it without bleeding. I didn't feel angry anymore. Not because they didn't deserve it. But because anger had done its job. It got me out. It protected me when love wouldn't. And once safety was built, I didn't need it as much. That night, I stood by my window watching city lights flicker on. And for the first time, I understood something deeply. I wasn't starting over. I was starting aligned. No more shrinking. No more over-explaining. No more proving my worth through sacrifice. Just choice. People think freedom feels explosive, like fireworks, like shouting from rooftops, like proving everyone wrong. It doesn't. Freedom feels quiet. It feels like waking up on a random Tuesday and realizing no one is mad at you. No one needs you to fix anything. No one is about to demand more than you can give. A year passed. Not dramatically. Just steadily. I got promoted. Not because I worked myself into exhaustion, but because I stopped doing other people's jobs for free. I decorated my apartment slowly. Not to impress anyone. Just things that made me feel grounded. A heavy bookshelf. Soft lighting. Plants I didn't kill. I stopped bracing for impact. That alone changed everything. Every once in a while, someone would ask about my family. I learned to answer without flinching. We're not in contact, I'd say. Not bitter. Not defensive. Just factual. And here's the part no one tells you: when you stop explaining yourself, people stop questioning you. I never went back. Not to the condo. Not to the city. Not to the role I played my entire life. I didn't need a final conversation. I didn't need apologies I knew would never come. Closure didn't arrive as a moment. It arrived as consistency. Day after day of peace. Sometimes I think about my mother. I wonder if she ever tells the story differently now. If she says I changed. If she says I became cold. If she says I abandoned them. She's allowed her version. It just doesn't get to rewrite mine. One night, sitting at my desk, I opened a fresh document and titled it, "Rules I Live By Now." I didn't plan to share it. It was just for me. But this is what I wrote. Love should not cost you your safety. A loyalty without respect is self-betrayal. Being needed is not the same as being valued. You don't owe access to people who harm you. Walking away is warrior. It's strategy. I read it once, then closed the file. Because the rules weren't aspirational anymore. They were already my life. I ran into someone from my past once. An old family friend. They looked at me carefully and said, "You seem different." I smiled. "I am." They hesitated. "Your parents say you're doing well." That made me laugh, not out loud. Inside. Because for once, their approval didn't matter. Here's the truth I wish someone had told me sooner. You can love people and still leave them. You can forgive someone and never speak to them again. You can be kind without being available. And you can be strong without being hard. On the anniversary of the day everything fell apart, I took myself out to dinner. No celebration. Just acknowledgement. I ordered my favorite meal, sat by the window, watched the city move, and for the first time, I didn't think about what I lost. I thought about what I saved. I saved my future. I saved my peace. I saved the version of myself that deserved better than survival. And if you're listening to this right now, if you've ever been treated like an option, a resource, or a backup plan, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not selfish for choosing yourself. You're not cruel for leaving. And you're not broken because you stayed longer than you should have. You were doing the best you could with what you knew then. But now you know better, and knowing better changes everything. The silence I live in now isn't empty, it's full. Full of choice, full of safety, full of me. And I will never apologize for that again.